In Hollywood, there aren't many actors and actresses whose mention doesn't spark heated debates about their talents. There's always that funny person who'll say Sylvester Stallone isn't actually the worst actor in Hollywood history, and critics are mistaken about him. There are even people who don't believe in the power of Belgian ballet. When it comes to the looks of Hollywood stars, there's inevitably someone who finds Brad Pitt terrifying or Kate Beckinsale beautiful. And when personal qualities of certain celebrities are scrutinized, you can find dirt even on the most revered ones. But there are a few individuals who are universally praised, with sighs of admiration, and one such person is Keanu Reeves. Naturally, Keanu isn't as multifaceted as Shia LaBeouf, nor is he as controversial. He's not known for his expertise in consuming banned substances, nor does he have stories of his dad touching him in specific places as a child. Some might even say Keanu Reeves is quite a dull guy in real life. But in terms of his career, he's had his fair share of ups and downs. Today, let's recall how Keanu became an actor. Thanks to his stepfather, Paul Aaron, who directed one of the highest-grossing films of the late 70s, A Force of One, starring Chuck Norris. According to legend, Keanu convinced his stepfather to make this movie. Aaron, a theater director, was hesitant to make such a film, but Keanu, a fan of Norris, persisted, nagging about it so much that Aaron finally agreed. Keanu made his first appearance on the big screen in this movie, playing a minor role. In a more familiar role, Keanu began appearing on the big screen in the mid-80s, taking on all sorts of roles. In a year, he could have 5 to 6 movies, some where he was in the background, others where he had a fleeting appearance. But the breakthrough for the actor came with the role in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, along with the success of Dangerous Liaisons with his supporting roles. The quantity played in his favor at one point. However, such a quantity of box office successes in one year happened by chance. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was produced by Dino De Laurentiis' studio in 1987, which happened to be the year when the studio went bankrupt. The movie with Keanu was shelved until it was bought by Orion Studios at a liquidation sale of De Laurentiis' assets. So, despite the film's budget of $10 million and grossing $41 million, Orion Studios earned more than De Laurentiis could have, as the rights were bought for just $2 million. The film hit theaters a couple of years after it was made, despite the success of 1989. Keanu continued to act in anything and everything, but now without the TD projects. All of Reeves's work made its way to cinemas, some of which failed, like My Own Private Idaho, while others, like Point Break, quietly passed through theaters but quickly gained recognition at festivals. In 1991, the actor starred in 5 films at once, one of which was Point Break. This film was the one that made Keanu Reeves a star. In addition, it gave us a great family franchise that we still watch today and will continue to watch for several more years, maybe even longer. After all, there are currently discussions about an incredible sequel about the head of the family who ended up in this film. Reeves didn't immediately accept the lead role in Point Break. Matthew Broderick turned it down before him. He later said he turned it down not because of the film that ended up in theaters, but because it's a common practice for films James Cameron works on to have scripts written by someone else before he comes on board. Cameron is credited as a producer in this case, but his involvement is a bit unconventional. Usually, Cameron is brought into a film as a producer in place of the wedding general. But in Point Break, he was forced to work, because Kathryn Bigelow, who directed Point Break, was married to Cameron at the time. So, he didn't really have a choice. According to Bigelow, they completely rewrote the existing script together. Later, according to Bigelow, Cameron often helped on set and even directed a few scenes. People often talk about the shootout at the gas station and Keanu Reeves's run through the residential area. Although Reeves signed on for the lead role, the actor recounts that all his friends and acquaintances advised him against appearing in action films about some robbers. Some even believed that his career would end with this film. Auditioning for the role of Hopper bypassed Johnny Depp and Kilmer, who also wanted their careers to end there. Instead of Bigelow, Lynch could have easily directed the third Terminator. Angrily, he fled from Point Break for Thelma. Ridley Scott also said he didn't want to make Point Break because he had just released Black Rain. However, since he didn't have many options at the time, he agreed to it, only to flee to something more interesting as soon as it appeared. Then Bigelow was brought on board, and she brought Cameron with her. Interestingly, Point Break hit theaters right after the second Terminator, and naturally, there was no talk of first place at the box office, more like second or third. 101 Dalmatians reissue and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey ranked lower. Yes, there were two Keanu Reeves films in the top 10 at the same time. It was a controversial decision, but in the end, Point Break grossed $43 million at the US box office, with an additional $40 million worldwide, on a $24 million budget. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, released at the same time, grossed $38 million on a $20 million budget. Until 1993, Fox Studios officially worked on a sequel to Point Break, but production was halted due to the script. The studio didn't want to spend big money on a sequel since the success of the first film wasn't as impressive as, for example, Die Hard, which grossed over $140 million worldwide with a similar budget. The studio had no problem allocating $70 million for the sequel. After Point Break, Reeves invited his talented nephew, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, to the film. It performed well at the box office, grossing $215 million on a $40 million budget. However, Coppola later criticized himself for casting Keanu Reeves, saying he only did it because he needed a rising young star in the film, and he chose someone who wasn't particularly suitable for the role. The same thing happened on Reeves's next film, Little Buddha, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. The film was poorly received by audiences, and Keanu faced a barrage of criticism. The film flopped, grossing $48 million on a $35 million budget, and Reeves received a Razzie nomination. Then came a significant moment for Reeves. He turned down the lead role in Speed. Half of Hollywood thought his career would end with that decision, just like with Point Break, but Reeves took the risk. Speed became one of the biggest box office hits of 1994, grossing $350 million on a $30 million budget. Immediately, a line of producers formed around the actor. In the mid-90s, he passed by numerous well-known films. Some, like The Island of Dr. Moreau, he could have drowned in, while in others, like Heat, he could have made a cameo appearance in a cult film. But he chose a rather controversial project with a quite original idea for that time, Johnny Mnemonic. Overall, the film's director, Robert Longo, recounted that Johnny Mnemonic was initially supposed to be a low-budget project, but Longo and writer William Gibson went around half of Hollywood with the script and requests for $1.5 million. No one wanted to invest that money in the project after they were rejected by all the studios they approached. Longo and Gibson were advised to increase the budget demands, and the guys started offering the script for $25 million. Several studios immediately became interested in the project. Initially, the lead role in the film was supposed to be played by Val Kilmer. The actor read the script, agreed to play Johnny Mnemonic, but after a couple of weeks, he received an offer from Warner Brothers to become Batman in the Batman film. Kilmer immediately declined, and that's when Reeves came into the picture. According to an ancient legend, the film's script was left on the doorstep of his house, and Reeves picked it up, read it, got interested, and contacted the producer himself. The filming of the movie was difficult, with constant clashes between the director, writer William Gibson, the studio, and the producers due to creative differences. During the filming, several producers left the project due to pressure from the studio, and director Robert Longo was often outraged and wanted to resign multiple times, but contractual obligations prevented him from doing so. There was a risk of significant fines. When the film was brought to test screenings, something completely unpredictable happened. Nobody liked it. Another unexpected turn was the massacre in the editing room. The film was cut down, reducing its runtime. Keanu didn't suffer too much from all these problems. The biggest damage was borne by Dolph Lundgren. His role was much larger initially, but when the film was cut, almost nothing remained of his character. Writer William Gibson was very unhappy with the final version of Johnny Mnemonic. Although Gibson is officially considered the sole screenwriter of the film, he distanced himself from it, claiming that nothing of his script remained in the film. According to him, the film's producers made significant changes to the script to cater to mass tastes. Johnny Mnemonic performed mediocrely at the box office, grossing only $52 million on a $26 million budget. Director Robert Longo's career ended abruptly, and all other adaptations of William Gibson's novels that were being developed in Hollywood quickly went into the dustbin. Keanu received a Golden Raspberry nomination for his role, but covered the flop with the romantic drama A Walk in the Clouds, which hit theaters just 4 months after Johnny Mnemonic. With a budget of $20 million, it grossed $95 million worldwide. Keanu then relaxed and gained over 10 kilograms, leading to a chain reaction of health issues. He suffered multiple injuries while playing hockey, including a severe neck injury that required him to refrain from any activity for several weeks. However, just a few weeks later, filming for Chain Reaction began, and Keanu gained even more weight due to his injuries. Hence, he looks like a Steven Seagal fan in the film, leading to the nickname Chain Reaction to Donuts on set. Keanu received another Golden Raspberry nomination for this film. The filming itself went without major problems, but after the test screenings, the film also underwent significant cuts. Actor Kiefer Sutherland, well known for TV series like Deadwood and Park and Recreation, played a role in the film, but upon seeing the final version, realized that most of his scenes were cut. Chain Reaction was quite an expensive film for its time, with a budget of $50 million. Nowadays, it would have been a film with a budget ranging from $90 to $100 million. It debuted at 4th place in the US box office and remained in the top 10 for only 2 weeks, grossing only $61 million. This moderate success, coupled with the failure of the film Feeling Minnesota, solidified Keanu's reputation as a box office poison. However, in 1997, he landed one of his most famous roles in The Devil's Advocate, a film that was initially supposed to be a big blockbuster with lightning bolts, explosions, and the like. However, big-name actors turned their noses up at such a film, including Al Pacino. Later, the script was significantly altered, and Keanu managed to convince Pacino to participate with the new script. However, Pacino's budget demands could not be met, so Keanu had to give up $3 million of his $8 million to cover the costs. The $57 million film grossed $153 million, which wasn't the most impressive result, but the film later became somewhat of a cult classic and possibly performed well on video. In Russia, it's much more popular than in the US, as evidenced by the number of ratings on Kinopoisk and major American film resources. The Devil's Advocate has 394,000 ratings in Russia and only 371,000 in the West, a very rare occurrence with such a large number of ratings. It was because of The Devil's Advocate that Keanu Reeves turned down the sequel to Speed. There are many different stories surrounding this event. According to one of them, Keanu simply couldn't do it because he wanted to go skateboarding with his band, Dogstar, which sounds suspicious since the shooting for Speed 2 and The Devil's Advocate were parallel. So, the actors simply preferred the film with Al Pacino. He himself later strongly confirmed this point, adding that he did not refuse the second Speed but asked to work more on the script and to postpone the shooting for several months ahead. But the studio refused to wait and, offended, replaced him. Reeves could have appeared in the movie Starship Troopers. Negotiations were officially conducted with him, but they fell through. Such decisions are often attributed to the director Paul Verhoeven, who did not want to see a star in his movie at the end of the 90s. For Keanu, it all happened under the sign of The Matrix. There are many different scary stories about what kind of movie it could have been and how it was shot against all odds. All this deserves a separate video, which will come someday. Here, it can be said that Keanu was incredibly lucky to find himself in The Matrix, which, in general, gave him the opportunity to remain in demand for many years. If the Wachowskis were more famous directors at the time of working on The Matrix, most likely there would have been no Ocean's movie. The entire cast could have been completely different. Officially, the excruciatingly talented nephew turned down the main role and looked at the project for some time. Thanks to the Will Media, films could have a more impressive budget. Castle, Crowe, Jean Reno, and even Sean Connery could have landed other roles in the film. But due to suspicious directors and a confusing script, they all turned down The Matrix. No one could explain to them what the action component of the film would look like. Reeves decided to take the risk again, and they allocated $60 million for him later due to delays in production. The film's budget will increase slightly and according to various data will amount to between $63 and $65 million. By the way, The Matrix started relatively modestly in theaters, taking $27 million in its first weekend. For example, The Mummy, which started a month after The Matrix, took $43 million at the start. The Hidden Threat, which pushed The Mummy off the top spot, took $63 million. And the reigning Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, Tarzan, took $41 and $34 million, respectively, on the second weekend of release. The Matrix pulled through in the long run, remaining in the top 10 films for weeks. Keanu Reeves' film sat in American theaters for 13 weeks, grossing $171 million and another $292 million worldwide. After that, The Matrix was showered with technical Oscars. Finally, Reeves became a big star, and they began to throw him fees exceeding $10 million. He was offered $14 million for a sports movie called The Replacement, but he ended up with $12.5 million, as with Devil's Advocate. Part of his money went into another actor's pocket this time, wanting to get Gene Hackman on board. The film, however, completely flopped, making only $51 million with a $50 million budget. In the same year, another movie arrived in theaters starring Keanu, Sweet November. Together with him, Ocean's 11 appeared, but it received a Golden Raspberry. The bad story associated with this film became known after its release. The film was supposed to be small and independent, and Keanu's friend Joe Charbonnet wanted to direct it. He persuaded Keanu to sign up for his debut, and Keanu easily checked all the necessary boxes without resorting to agents' help, as usually happens. He himself claims that it was about a third-rate role. He would have appeared a few times in an independent film, which would have attracted attention to the film, and his friend John could have advanced in Hollywood. But his friend Joe managed to interest the Universe studio with his script, which, noticing Keanu in the project, decided to make a completely different film. They invested $50 million in it. Reeves's minor role immediately turned out to be quite impressive. He himself claims that he wanted to refuse to participate and even claimed that his signature on the contract was forged, but he did not sue. Actors convinced him that everyone knew about their friendship with Charbonnet and proof that the signature was forged would take many years. So Keanu spat and practically acted for free, as the contract provided, to get rid of obligations and at the same time from an extraordinary friend. The film, surprisingly, did not work out at first. They started cutting it, and then they premiered it in the dead of September, or it failed, making $47 million with a budget of $53 million. The career of Keanu Reeves's former friend John ended with this film. He did not shoot anything else while preparing for the Matrix sequels. Keanu again went on a bunch of suspicious projects to collect Golden Raspberry nominations. One of them came for the flop Hardball Next Door, which turned out to be unnecessary. Sweet November collected only $65 million with a $40 million budget. Here, Keanu was pitted, and the Razzie went to Charlize Theron. The only success the actor had between the Matrix films was a small film by director Sam Raimi. He had a supporting role in the film, which grossed $44 million with a budget of $10 million. In 2003, the sequel and The Revolution disappointed many. The sequel performed well at the box office, but The Revolution that followed just 6 months later did much worse. However, it cannot be considered a box office failure, as it managed to gross $427 million with a budget of $150 million. The second film grossed $74 million. Such a significant drop in revenue is usually attributed to the hasty release of the third film. After the second one was heavily criticized, it is considered that the audience had not yet had time to miss the hero, plus there was a slight disappointment from the second film. After this, an unwritten rule was established in Hollywood not to release sequels earlier than a year later. However, for Reeves himself, shooting in the Matrix sequels became the most lucrative in his entire career. He often finds himself at the top of lists of actors who received the highest fee for their participation in the second and third Matrix films. Keanu earned over $100 million in percentages for his role in the second and third Matrix films. However, there is one point that everyone probably knows about: the legend that Reeves gave part of his money to visual effects specialists because, in his opinion, they made the greatest contribution to the success of the entire series. Without the legend, it turns out that Keanu paid for the work of the specialists out of his own pocket during filming and thus received a significant percentage of the film's box office revenue. Usually, this amount is between $30 and $40 million, which Keanu spent on the visual effects of the second and third Matrix films. So, even though he received $100 million after the film's release, he actually earned less. Constantine is another film in which Keanu replaced a talented nephew who was supposed to be involved at the beginning of the film's development. The film was supposed to be directed by Tarsam Singh, known for the films Cell and In the Zone. The main role was supposed to be played by Nicolas Cage. However, Tarsam left the project at some point due to creative differences with the studio. After Tarsam left, Nicolas also left Constantine. Another version of the talented escape is based on Nicholas's greed. They started asking him to cut his fee from $20 million to $10 million, and he wouldn't stand for such an insult. But Keanu agreed to star for only $7 million. Although now Keanu recalls with warmth the year of working on the film, his candidacy was heavily criticized for the Constantine comics. The Englishman from Liverpool, resembling the singer Sting, became the main character in the film, an American from Los Angeles, resembling Keanu Reeves. The creators claimed that they had to take this step because this was the only way to sell the script in Hollywood. Despite Keanu in the lead role, the film's budget had to be cut due to its adult rating, and several expensive scenes were cut from it. Due to the savings, the film had a Mexican beginning, and a large action scene in Istanbul was planned, but the authors couldn't pull it off, despite a budget of $100 million. In theaters, Constantine grossed $230 million, and all sequels were immediately cancelled. However, it can now be said that they were not cancelled forever, but for 20 years. Recently, a sequel with Keanu Reeves officially went into production, and Keanu himself and some actors from the first film are supposed to return. After 2005, Reeves entered a long black streak. The films either didn't make it to theaters or completely flopped. The only modest success was Street Kings by director David Ayer, which grossed $65 million with a budget of $20 million. However, the criminal twist of Henry's private life did not meet expectations. On top of all that, Keanu was hit with powerful flops like 47 Ronin and The Tai Chi Master. 47 Ronin also marked Reeves' directorial debut, after which he didn't touch directing anymore. He began signing up for really suspicious films, most of which didn't even get a theatrical release, and some, like Daughter of God, were shelved for a couple of years. Speaking of Daughter of God, it was another project where Keanu was supposed to have a supporting role but ended up on the poster. His incident with his friend Joe didn't teach him anything, and he signed contracts without reading them. But perhaps that's why Keanu is considered a good guy who is somewhat anomalous in Hollywood. However, films like Knock Knock, Exposed, and The Neon Demon missed wide release. Keanu might have starred in Bruce Willis's films or in what's left of Gibson's career, who replaced Willis in his movies. But then, at the end of 2014, John Wick happened. This small film by Chad Stahelski, who was a stunt double for Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, was originally intended to feature an older actor in the lead role. However, producer Basil Iwanek suggested making John Wick younger and simply casting an actor whose coolness wouldn't be questioned. Keanu was no longer a big star, so they barely scraped together $20 million for the film. Due to budget constraints, most of Keanu's opponents were played by the same stuntmen. John Wick grossed $86 million at the box office with a budget of $20 million, and Keanu unexpectedly became a lifeline. Plus, he was remembered on the internet and quickly became one of its main symbols. However, apart from the John Wick series, which has been a hit since 2014, none of his other films have performed well at the box office. Some of them failed to reach theaters, and the quality of some of them recalls Bruce Willis's films. However, with John Wick, everything is great. The third film grossed $326 million at the box office with a budget ranging from $55 to $70 million. Next spring, we'll get the fourth film in the series. Not long ago, another potential blockbuster returned to the big screen, The Matrix. However, it returned only to become one of the biggest flops of the year, grossing only $157 million with a budget of $190 million. There are various amusing stories about the tinfoil hat, with the silly studio not realizing they were being mocked, and the film being originally conceived as a joke, supposedly to keep The Matrix untouched. But it remains to be seen why the White Knights killed Speed Racer, who has the same quality as The Matrix 4, or why the Wachowskis killed Jupiter Ascending, which also had a similar quality. But the silly studio against the White Knights always sounds more interesting. Anyway, Keanu himself is doing okay for now. As already noted, he's supposed to have a sequel to Constantine in the future. He's also working on a film based on his own comic book and even lending his likeness to various computer games. So, he should be fine in the near future. Thank you for your attention, stay tuned.